Discover the shocking story of how a young waitress uncovered the hidden secret behind a mysterious beggar. The big city was a whirlwind of movement and sound, a cacophony of car horns, sirens, and hurried conversations echoing through the paved wide streets. People moved as if they were in a constant sea of urgency and goals, each with their own trajectory and destiny. In the heart of this urban chaos, a stylish restaurant stood out as an oasis of refinement. Located in a bustling neighborhood, the restaurant attracted a diverse clientele that reflected the city's vibrant character. Emily Parker, at 24, was the warm soul of this restaurant. She worked with dedication and a constant smile, endearing herself to both customers and colleagues. Her brown, slightly wavy hair fell softly around her face, and her clear eyes conveyed a genuine kindness. Despite the long hours and demands of the job, Emily never lost her composure. Her beauty was simple, but her warmth and willingness to help made her stand out in the restaurant's sophisticated environment. Nearby, on the sidewalk stretching along a busy square, Ethan Brooks, a 28-year-old, spent his days as a beggar. He had recently arrived in the area, and his presence was a stark contrast to the city's vibrant energy. Ethan was a handsome man, but the suffering and harshness of life on the streets had left visible marks on his face. His eyes, a mix of green and brown, held a deep sadness, reflecting the harshness of his current situation. His disheveled and worn appearance seemed out of place against the youth he still possessed. Emily began to notice Ethan soon after he started to settle near the restaurant. She saw him often wandering the streets and rummaging through trash bins in search of something to eat. There was something in his gaze and posture that captured Emily's attention. Her curiosity about him grew each day, and she began to wonder about the story behind that sad look. In the early days, Emily only observed Ethan from a distance, but soon she felt an urge to act. During her breaks, she started bringing part of her lunch to him. The gesture was initially simple, an offer of food to a man who seemed to need more than just a meal. Ethan initially accepted the food reluctantly, but over time he began to look forward to these moments. The gratitude in his eyes was evident, and Emily began to realize that this small act of kindness was making a difference in his life. The interaction between Emily and Ethan was always marked by exchanges of smiles and kind words. Emily, with her curious and supportive nature, often tried to engage Ethan in conversations, asking how he was and if there was anything more she could do to help. Ethan, in turn, responded briefly and reservedly. He avoided discussing details about his past, focusing more on the difficulty of living on the streets and the challenges he faced in the present. The contrast between the elegant, comfortable world of the restaurant and Ethan's harsh life on the streets was evident. While Emily worked in an environment of sophistication and comfort, Ethan struggled daily to find the basics for survival. These moments of interaction became a refuge for both Emily and Ethan. For Emily, the simple act of offering food had become something more meaningful. She felt that by reaching out to Ethan, she was making a real difference in his life, even if it was small. As each day passed, Emily's curiosity about Ethan grew. She felt there was more behind Ethan's sad appearance and wanted to understand his situation better. She decided to seek information about resources and organizations that could help Ethan get out of his situation. Her desire to help was not limited to providing a daily meal. She wanted to do something more substantial to improve his life. Emily also began to notice how Ethan was starting to open up a little more to her. His smiles became more frequent, and his responses, though still brief, began to reveal a bit more about his personality. He was starting to trust Emily, even if subtly, and this encouraged her to continue offering her support. She felt that, despite his precarious situation, Ethan had an inner strength that kept him afloat, and she wanted to be part of that. The growing connection between Emily and Ethan was a small flame of hope and compassion amidst the city's chaos. For Emily, the simple act of offering part of her lunch had become a gesture of true friendship and solidarity. And for Ethan, Emily's presence, though modest, was a reminder that there was still kindness and humanity in a world that often seemed indifferent. As the days went by and the relationship between Emily and Ethan deepened, both began to find a sense of purpose and connection that transcended the hustle and harshness of their respective lives. Emily felt she was making a difference, and Ethan, in turn, began to see the possibility of a better future, fueled by the hope that Emily had kindled in his heart. A few days after their last conversation, Emily continued to find refuge in the park during her breaks. The park, with its serene setting and bubbling fountain, had become a space of calm and contemplation amid the whirlwind of city life. Emily settled into her usual bench, enjoying a brief pause in the middle of her workday. She often brought part of her lunch to savor, and these moments were filled with a peaceful quiet, contrasting with the bustle of the restaurant and city life. It was a typical autumn afternoon, with leaves falling and the sun casting a soft light over the park. Emily was in the midst of her meal when she spotted Ethan approaching. He looked visibly tired and dirty, but even in his worn state, there was a lingering beauty in his bore and extra weight. Appearance. His eyes, though dull and tired, carried a glimmer that reflected a youth and dignity not entirely erased by life on the streets. "Hi, Ethan," Emily said, raising a hand in greeting. Her voice was warm and welcoming as always. Ethan, upon seeing her, made an effort to smile, though exhaustion and pain were evident on his face. "Hi, Emily," he replied, his voice indicating deep fatigue. He approached, gratefully accepting the box of food Emily offered. The gesture was routine, but today Emily noticed Ethan seemed more downcast than usual. His body was slumped, and his expression. Emily watched as Ethan began eating with an appetite, a clear sign of his hunger. She tried to start a light conversation to distract him from any sadness he might be feeling. "How's your day going?" she asked, trying to keep the tone casual. Ethan looked at her, his eyes meeting hers. "It's going a bit more tiring today," he replied. His voice was softer than usual, and there was a lack of enthusiasm in his words. Noticing that something was truly wrong, Emily continued to chat about everyday topics, trying to keep the conversation upbeat. She talked about what had happened at the restaurant, some funny stories about customers, and the small quirks of the day. Ethan made an effort to respond, offering a few comments and smiles here and there, but it was clear his mind was elsewhere. He seemed to be struggling to focus on the conversation, which made Emily even more concerned. "You seem a bit more down than usual," Emily commented gently, trying to broach the subject delicately. "Is there something that's bothering you more than usual?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, his expression growing darker. "It's hard to explain," he began, "but I've been thinking about my past. There's something I can't understand, and it's troubling me." Emily, sensing an opportunity to understand better, asked a more direct question. "Have you been thinking about your family? What do you remember about them?" she asked with genuine interest. Ethan looked at her, his eyes carrying a mix of confusion and sadness. "It sounds strange and even crazy, but I remember an accident, something that happened to my mother," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I have vague memories of something terrible, but the details are confusing. It's like trying to remember a dream that's fading away." Emily listened intently, her heart aching as she saw Ethan suffering. He continued, "I also remember running away from somewhere. I can't identify exactly what it was. It might have been a strange house or an orphanage. Everything is very foggy and confusing." Ethan seemed frustrated, as if he was struggling to piece together an incomplete puzzle. In addition to the vague memories, Ethan also recalled a sense of abandonment. "I remember that my father started to pull away," he said. "He isolated himself and became more distant. It's like I lost connection with him in a way I can't clearly explain." The sadness in his voice was palpable, and he tried to laugh at what he was saying, as if laughter was a way to cope with the pain. "I know it sounds more like a made-up story than something real," he said with a sad smile. "Sometimes I feel like all this is just a way to justify the hard life I have now." Emily sensed the intensity of Ethan's inner struggle and wanted to offer more comfort. "If you remember anything else, please let me know," she said softly. "I know it can be hard to deal with these confusing memories." Ethan nodded, trying to push away the disturbing thoughts. "I remember a name," he said, "but it's very vague. The word Brooke just comes to mind. It might not even be the name. It's just a feeling I have." Emily was intrigued by the mention of the name, but decided not to delve deeper into the topic at that moment. She felt there was something curious about how Ethan mentioned the name, but she kept it to herself. Deep down, she found the story intriguing and was curious to know more. "I understand," she said, offering a comforting smile. "Sometimes our thoughts and memories are confusing, and it's hard to distinguish what is real from what is imagined." Ethan shifted the conversation, his tone becoming more resolute. "You know, Emily, maybe I should just accept my current life as it is. These memories might just be things from the past. Maybe they didn't even really happen. I need to focus on the present and live what's real now," he said, his voice carrying resignation. Emily felt a wave of empathy as she heard his words. "You're right. Sometimes it's important to accept what we have in the present and find comfort in the things we can control," she replied. With that, the conversation came to an end. Emily realized that her break was coming to an end and that she needed to return to work. She stood up from the bench, offering one last smile to Ethan. "I have to go back now, but know that I'm here if you need to talk more. Take care, Ethan," she said. Ethan nodded, a look of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate everything you do." Emily walked away, returning to the restaurant with a mixed feeling of sadness and curiosity. The encounter with Ethan had left a mark on her mind, and she wondered about the true stories behind the fragmented memories he had shared. Deep down, she felt there was more to Ethan's story than he himself could understand, and the connection they had formed continued to grow, even amidst the uncertainty. A few days had passed since Emily's last conversation with Ethan in the park. Emily's routine was still busy with work, but Ethan's story remained constantly on her mind. Every detail he had shared seemed to weave into a web of mysteries, and Emily felt an increasing need to uncover the truth behind the name Brooke and Ethan's murky past. Emily spent her free time reviewing the conversation she had with Ethan, trying to remember every little detail. She had started a personal investigation, going through files and conducting research in hopes of finding any clue that might clarify Ethan's fragmented memories. Without telling Ethan what she was doing, Emily immersed herself in her research, determined to help in any way she could. However, her hectic life and constant work limited the time she could dedicate to the investigation. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks, and frustration began to build up. Emily found scattered information, often with no direct connection to Ethan's story. Every lead seemed to lead to a dead end, and a sense of helplessness started to weigh on her. After weeks of fruitless searching, Emily decided she needed professional help. Although she didn't have much money, she felt the cause was more important than anything else. With determination and a tight budget, she hired a private investigator. Her hope was that an experienced eye and additional resources could unravel the mystery that intrigued her. The investigator began his work, promising Emily he would do his best to find relevant information. Emily gave him all the details she had about the name Brooke and the fragments of Ethan's story. The investigator did a preliminary analysis and began looking into old records and newspapers. After a few days, the investigator returned with an update. He had found records in a distant city related to a company called Brooke Company. According to the records, the company had gone through a severe financial crisis around the time Ethan had mentioned. The investigator explained that due to the complexity of the research, he had needed to travel to the distant city to obtain this information. Emily listened attentively, feeling a mix of hope and nervousness. The investigator continued, explaining that the records and newspapers in Emily's city did not contain detailed information about the company's crisis. The company seems to have faced a difficult period, and the owner was absent for many years due to personal problems, the investigator explained. Unfortunately, we couldn't find out exactly what those problems were. Emily frowned, feeling a pang of frustration. "Did you find out the names of the couple who owned the company?" she asked, eager for more details. The investigator handed Emily a sheet of paper with the names. She looked at the names and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. "Do you know if there are any old photos of the company's owners?" she asked, her hope growing. "Yes," replied the investigator. "I found some old photos in newspaper records. It seems the company was quite involved in social events at the time. I'll show you a photo I found." He handed Emily an old black and white photograph. The image showed a young, well-dressed couple at a social event. Both had an air of sophistication and high class. Emily examined the photo closely, her heart beating faster. The couple in the photo seemed oddly familiar, and the connection to the name Brooke seemed increasingly real. "This is incredible," Emily remarked, amazed. "It's like they're connected to Ethan's story in some way, and I recognize the name somehow." The investigator continued, "I also traced the timeline of the Brooke Company up to the present day. After the severe financial crisis, the company slowly managed to recover. It still exists today, but it has moved locations and changed its line of business. It went from being a shoe company to a furniture manufacturer." Emily was surprised. "Furniture? I remember something about shoes when I was a child," she revealed. "My mother used to wear a pair of Brooke brand shoes, and I always thought they were beautiful. I never imagined there could be a connection." The investigator nodded. "It's an interesting coincidence. The company relocated to a new city and changed its line of business. The owner left management to more experienced people who managed to turn things around and make the company prosper again. Currently, he lives reclusively in his old mansion and is not very involved in social life." "So did you manage to contact the company owner?" Emily asked eagerly. "Yes," replied the investigator. "It was a difficult and lengthy process. I posed as a business inquiring client and managed to have a brief phone conversation. The owner was reluctant to discuss details and seemed very uncomfortable. He ended the call quickly, without providing much information." The investigator then handed Emily a second photo. "Here's a photo of the company owner at an event he attended about 10 years ago. He was in his 45 to 50s at the time." Emily examined the photo carefully. The man in the image had features that seemed familiar. His face and expression resembled Ethan's. Emily felt a shiver as she noticed the resemblance. "It's truly remarkable," she said, trying to process the new information. "The resemblance is striking. I'm not sure if I'm imagining things or if there really is a connection." The investigator smiled, understanding Emily's excitement. "There seems to be a link, but only direct confirmation could ensure that. However, the fact that you found these connections is promising." Emily asked if the investigator had found a current location for the company owner. He confirmed that he had and provided her with an address. "It seems to be a comfortable mansion, not too large, but still quite luxurious. It might be where the company owner lives now." He handed Emily the paper with the address written on it. "I hope this helps in your search." Emily took the paper with the information and felt a wave of joy and hope. "Thank you for all your work," she said with a broad smile. "This means a lot to me." The investigator said goodbye, and Emily was left alone, looking at the second photo she had received. The resemblance to Ethan was undeniable, and she felt she was getting closer to an answer. With a racing heart and a renewed sense of determination, Emily knew she needed to keep going. The search for answers was just beginning, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next day, Emily was consumed by palpable anxiety as she waited for Ethan to arrive at the park. Her heart raced, a mix of fear, joy, and hope swirling inside her. The anticipation of revealing to Ethan what she had discovered about his past made her feel both excited and apprehensive. She wondered how he would react to the new information and felt a bit unsure about how to present it in a sensitive and encouraging way. While attending to customers at work, Emily couldn't keep her eyes off the window. Every moment, her mind raced with thoughts of Ethan arriving, and she watched the park anxiously. Finally, her eyes spotted Ethan, who was in the park, visibly tired and dirty, yet still carrying a trace of beauty despite the hardships. Her break was ending soon, and Emily realized she needed to act quickly. With a hurried request to her friend and co-worker to cover for her, she left the restaurant and ran to Ethan. He was leaning against a bench, looking tired but curious as he saw her approaching in such a rush. "Hi, Ethan." Emily greeted him with a wide smile, trying to mask her anxiety. Ethan, a bit surprised by Emily's enthusiasm, stood up and returned the greeting. "Hi, Emily. You seem excited. What happened?" Emily hesitated for a moment, struggling to find the right words. "I couldn't forget the story you told me. I was really intrigued by it," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "And as our friendship has grown, I felt like I needed to do something for you." Ethan looked at her with a mix of surprise and concern. "You didn't need to worry about that. I've tried looking into my past before and never found anything. It's better to forget these things and accept life as it is." Emily, determined, interrupted him. "Let me finish. With the help of a detective, I was able to find some strong clues that might lead to a discovery about your family." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Ethan. The image he saw was a copy of an old black and white photo showing a young, well-dressed couple at a social event. Ethan took the paper with trembling hands, his eyes fixed on the photo as he stared at it in silence. "These are the names of the couple," Emily said softly. The detective managed to find this photo in old records. Ethan looked at the photo with a stunned expression. His breathing quickened a bit, and tears began to form in his ears. Emily noticed the change in her friend and felt moved by the emotion he was showing. "Do you remember anything seeing these names?" Emily asked with anticipation. Ethan hesitated, his voice a bit choked. "Yes, they remind me of something good maybe. I'm not sure, but it feels familiar." Emily, excited, briefly explained the results of the investigation and how the name Brooke was associated with a company that had gone through a crisis and recovered, changing its line of business and location. Ethan was deeply moved. His tears were now flowing freely, and he didn't try to hold them back. "This is amazing," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I never imagined there could be a real connection." Emily, feeling relieved and happy, hugged Ethan tightly. "I'm so glad you're seeing this. Let's try one more time. If there's a chance, we need to take it." Ethan, still emotional, hugged her back. "Yes, let's try one more time." Emily then showed Ethan the second photo, the one of the older man she had received from the detective. Ethan studied the photo carefully. He smiled enigmatically as he looked at the image. Emily mentioned that she thought there was a resemblance, even if slight, perhaps in the eyes, but she couldn't explain it exactly. Ethan looked at the photo and, with a sad smile, said, "I think the man looks sad. And his wife?" Emily replied that the only photo she had found was the one she'd already shown, and that she hadn't found any more data or images of the couple. "But I have an address," she said, handing him the last piece of paper with the location written on it. This is the address of the mansion where the man from the photo might be living. It's in another city, far from here. Would you have the courage to go there?" Ethan hesitated, his face showing concern and insecurity. "I don't know. No one will want to talk to a beggar or welcome someone as dirty and unkempt as me. It would be a source of ridicule and shame." Emily smiled at him, trying to calm him. "That's nonsense. I know you're a kind and good-hearted person. I feel no shame in being your friend." Ethan looked at her, grateful, his emotions close to the surface. "Thank you, Emily." Emily laughed softly and added, "I can help you improve your appearance a bit. If you take a bath, get a haircut and shave, and wear more appropriate clothes, it might help. What do you think?" Ethan laughed, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "That sounds great." Determined to help her friend, Emily took Ethan to a barber. He was nervous and a bit awkward as his hair and beard were trimmed. Emily watched with a satisfied smile, admiring Ethan's gradual transformation. With each step, his appearance started to change, even if modestly. After the haircut, Emily took him to her apartment. Ethan, now looking more presentable but still in rags, was a bit nervous about being in Emily's home. He thanked her for her trust. "I never imagined a stranger could come into your home," he said, touched. Emily smiled and replied, "You're not a stranger, you're my friend. And as a friend, you need to take a proper bath." She pointed to the bathroom and handed him some old clean clothes she had kept. "Here are some old clothes. I just hope they fit." Ethan laughed, surprised. "How do you have these clothes at home?" Emily felt a bit embarrassed. "They were from an old boyfriend. It was the last reminder I kept. Lucky I didn't throw them away." She laughed with Ethan and playfully said, "Now go to the bathroom and take a good shower." After some time, Ethan emerged from the bathroom with a renewed look, wearing clean clothes and with well-groomed hair. Emily was eager and upon seeing him was delighted. Although he was still thin and sunburned, the transformation was visible. His beauty, which had been hidden before, was now starting to emerge. Ethan, a bit embarrassed, said, "It's been a long time since I felt this good and took such a nice shower. Thank you for that." They approached each other, a bit awkward, and Emily said, "You can sleep in the living room tonight. I trust you completely. And tomorrow morning we'll catch a bus to the other city." As the night went on, Emily and Ethan settled into their respective rooms, each immersed in their thoughts. The anticipation of what the next day might bring hung in the air. Both were anxious, reflecting on the journey they were about to undertake and the possibilities that would unfold with this new chance to learn more about Ethan's past. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Emily and Ethan met at the small bus station. The morning was cool, and a gentle breeze blew, but the atmosphere between them was heavy. Ethan, now more presentable in clean clothes and with a haircut, seemed more restless than ever. Emily, by his side, tried to stay calm, but the worry in her eyes was evident. "Emily, I really don't know if this is a good idea," Ethan murmured as they waited for the bus. Emily squeezed his hand, trying to convey confidence. "I know you're scared, Ethan, but maybe it's time to face your past. It might be painful, but it's the only way to find peace." Ethan nodded slowly, still hesitant. "But what if what I find out is worse than I imagine? What if I ran away from something I shouldn't have?" "Whatever the truth is, you don't have to face it alone," Emily replied, looking into his eyes. "I'm here with you, and we'll find out together." The bus finally arrived and they boarded, starting the long journey to the city where the man from the photo, William Brooke, lived. The ride was quiet, but the silence between them reflected the growing tension. Emily tried to distract Ethan by telling funny stories about her job at the restaurant, but he only responded with nods and murmurs, lost in his own thoughts. After a few hours of travel, they reached their destination. The city was quiet, with tree-lined streets and imposing houses. There was a certain melancholy in the air, as if the place held secrets no one dared to reveal. Emily held tightly to the paper with the address the detective had provided and guided Ethan through the streets to a more secluded area, where the mansions were larger and older. The house they were looking for was an imposing structure with an iron gate and gardens that seemed forgotten by time. "Ethan, we're here," Emily said softly, stopping in front of the gate. "Are you ready?" Ethan looked at the mansion, his face pale and his hands trembling. I don't know. All of this feels so surreal." Emily squeezed his hand again. "You can do it. We'll go together." They walked through the slightly open gate and along the stone path leading to the mansion's entrance. The silence was oppressive, as if even the birds around knew something important was about to happen. When they reached the door, Emily looked at Ethan, who took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, and the silence that followed was almost unbearable. After a few moments, the intercom next to the door crackled, and a rough but familiar voice asked, "Who is it?" Ethan swallowed before responding. "My name is Ethan. I think I might be William Brooks' son." On the other side, there was a long, tense pause. Finally, the voice replied, with a mix of surprise and distrust. "Wait a moment." The door slowly opened, and Emily and Ethan were greeted by an elderly butler, who watched them with curiosity and caution. "Mr. Brooke is in the library. Please follow me." They were guided through a long hallway adorned with old paintings and luxurious furniture to a large wooden door that the butler opened gently. Inside, the library was imposing, with bookshelves from floor to ceiling and windows letting in sunlight, casting a soft glow over the room. Sitting in an armchair by an unlit fireplace was William Brooke. His hair was gray, his face marked by the wrinkles of age and pain. He looked up as they entered, and his eyes widened slightly upon seeing Ethan. There was something about the young figure that seemed familiar, yet distant. "Mr. Brooke, this is Ethan," the butler announced before quietly leaving the three alone. William slowly rose as if the weight of the years were on his shoulders. "Ethan," he repeated, his voice almost a whisper. "You said you think you're my son?" Ethan, with a dry throat, nodded. "I don't remember much, but there are fragments, and the name Brooke. And this photo," he said, pulling out the image of the couple Emily had given him. William took the photo with trembling hands and looked at it in silence. His eyes filled with tears, and he seemed to struggle to maintain his composure. "Margaret," he murmured, recognizing his wife in the photo. "She was your mother, and you are Ethan, my son." The confirmation hit Ethan like a wave of shock. "My mother? What happened to her?" William closed his eyes as if the pain was unbearable. "She died, Ethan, in a car accident, shortly before you disappeared. It all happened so fast. I was lost. I couldn't handle the pain, and everything fell apart. I sent you to a boarding school, trying to keep you safe, away from the chaos, but you ran away. I searched for you, but didn't know where you were. It was as if you had vanished from the face of the earth." Ethan felt his legs weaken, and he sat heavily in a nearby chair. The vague memories began to make sense. He had run away, filled with anger and pain, trying to get back home but got lost along the way. And now, all that time, his mother had been dead, and his father had isolated himself in a world of sadness and regret. "I'm so sorry," Ethan murmured, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know. I just wanted to come home." William approached and hesitantly placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm sorry too, son. I'm sorry for losing you, for failing as a father, but now you're here, and if you're willing, maybe we can start over." Ethan looked at his father, seeing in his eyes the same suffering he carried. "I don't know what to say. Part of me still feels lost, but I want to try." Emily, who had been silently watching with tears in her eyes, stepped forward. You have a chance now. It might not be easy, but you can rebuild it together." William nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're right. Ethan, you will always have a place here. This is your home, and I am your father. Let's start from there." Ethan, still processing everything, looked around the library, absorbing the idea that he had finally found his place in the world. It might not be what he had imagined, and the pain of losing his mother still weighed on his heart, but now he knew he was not alone. "Thank you, Dad," Ethan whispered, allowing himself for the first time in many years to feel a thread of hope. As the day went on, William showed Ethan some old family photos and told stories about the time before the tragedy. Emily, realizing they needed this time together, decided to give them space, stepping out to explore the surroundings of the house. When night finally came, William prepared a room for Ethan. Father and son said goodbye with a hug, still tentative but full of promises of a new beginning. Ethan lay down in bed, exhausted, but with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew there was still much to overcome, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. As the night shadows enveloped the house, a new light began to shine in Ethan's life. He had found his family, and with it, a part of himself he had thought lost forever. The days following Ethan's reunion with his father were filled with new discoveries and emotions. The relationship between them, which had started hesitantly, gradually grew stronger. William, still haunted by the ghosts of the past, was making an effort to reconnect with his son. Emily, always supportive, became a foundation for both of them. She'd become more than just a friend. She was a bridge between the present and a future that had once seemed unreachable. That afternoon, Ethan and Emily walked through the mansion's gardens, which were beginning to come back to life. The trees, once as battered as Ethan's feelings, were turning greener, and the flowers were starting to bloom again, as if reflecting the renewal happening in Ethan's life. The air was filled with the scent of roses, a soft aroma that seemed to echo the hope growing within them. "Ethan, have you been feeling better?" Emily asked, glancing at him sideways. The gentle breeze tousled her hair as she smiled shyly, trying to hide the worry still lingering in her heart. She knew that Ethan's emotional healing would be a long process, but felt relieved to see the first signs of recovery. "Yes, I have. It's still hard, you know. But I think I'm starting to find my place," Ethan replied, smiling at Emily. The shadow of uncertainty that had always lingered in his eyes seemed to be fading. He had changed so much since meeting her. The lost and disoriented man was starting to be replaced by someone more confident and self-assured. It was as if every step in the garden was also a step toward his own reconstruction. "I'm glad to hear that," Emily said, her voice soft and affectionate. "You deserve to be happy, Ethan." Her words were sincere and filled with care. Emily had always believed that Ethan had a good heart, and seeing him finally recognize his worth brought her a quiet joy. They continued walking in silence for a few moments, absorbing the peace of the place. The sun rays filtering through the tree leaves created a play of light and shadow on the ground, as if nature was playing with them, celebrating that moment of tranquility. Ethan felt grateful for everything Emily had done for him. Not only had she helped him find his father, but she had been by his side through all the tough times, never giving up on him even when he was close to doing so himself. "Emily," he began, stopping to face her, "I don't know what I would have done without you. You changed my life, gave me hope when I had nothing. I don't know how to thank you." Ethan held Emily's hand firmly, as if afraid she might disappear at any moment. To him, Emily was more than a friend. She was an anchor, a safe harbor amidst the storms he had faced. She smiled, gently touching Ethan's hand. "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. I did what any friend would do." Her words were modest, but Emily knew there was something deeper between them. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, how his words seemed to carry a feeling that went beyond gratitude. "But it's more than that," Ethan insisted, his voice now more resolute. "Emily, you are more than a friend to me. I don't know when it happened, but I've fallen in love with you." He said this with a mix of courage and vulnerability, his heart racing as he awaited her reaction. Emily was surprised, her heart racing in her chest. She had always known there was something special between them, but hearing Ethan say these words was different. It was real, it was deep. A wave of warmth washed over her, and she felt her cheeks flush. The feeling she had kept hidden was now exposed. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling, "I feel the same way about you. From the moment I met you, something about you caught my attention, and over time, that feeling has only grown." Emily could feel her heart beating strongly in her chest, as if it might burst with happiness. This was the confirmation that everything she had felt until now was not in vain. Ethan smiled, relief and happiness lighting up his face. "I couldn't be happier to hear that," he said, pulling her into a hug. They stood there, together, in a moment that seemed eternal, just enjoying each other's company. The world around them seemed to stop, as if nothing else mattered except that moment. After a while, Ethan pulled back slightly, keeping Emily's hands in his. "Emily, I know it might seem early, but I don't want to waste any more time. Life has already taken so much from me, and I don't want to risk losing you too." His words came out with intense sincerity, reflecting the fear he still carried of losing something as precious as Emily's love. Emily looked into Ethan's eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "What do you mean, Ethan?" she asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. The sparkle in his eyes, the way he held her hands, all indicated that something important was coming. He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Emily. I want to build a future together, full of love and happiness. Will you marry me?" The words came out charged with emotion, and Ethan felt a tightness in his chest as he waited for her response. Emily's heart leapt, the emotion overflowing in her chest. She had always dreamed of true love, and now, before her was the man who had captured her heart in a way she had never imagined. It was as if all her dreams were coming true right there at that moment. "Yes, Ethan," she replied without hesitation. "I accept. I want to be by your side forever." Her words came with conviction, and the smile that spread across Emily's face was a reflection of the joy she felt. Ethan's eyes sparkled with tears he tried unsuccessfully to hold back. He pulled Emily closer, sealing the promise with a gentle and loving kiss. It was a moment they would both never forget, the beginning of a new journey together. That kiss seemed to seal not just a commitment, but also the promise of a future filled with happiness and challenges they would face side by side. Later that night, William, upon hearing the news, was moved. He had always feared that his son would never find happiness after everything they had been through, but seeing Ethan and Emily together, in love, gave him new hope. "You are proof that even in the darkest situations, love can bloom," William said with a sincere smile. "I'm so happy for you both." William's words were filled with an affection he hadn't expressed in a long time, and it deeply touched Ethan's heart. The small family dinner, improvised to celebrate the engagement, was simple but full of warmth. Emily and Ethan were radiant, sharing smiles and knowing glances throughout the evening. William, watching them, couldn't help but think about how fate had been generous in bringing Emily into their lives. She was like a ray of sunshine, dispelling the dark clouds that had lingered over their lives for so long. As everyone retired for the night, Ethan and Emily found themselves back in the garden, where it all began. The full moon illuminated the sky, and the silence of the night was broken only by the soft sound of the wind whispering through the leaves. The stars shone brightly, as if celebrating the newly discovered love between them. "Ethan," Emily said, resting her head on his shoulder, "I can't wait to start our life together." There was a serenity in her voice, a certainty that despite all the obstacles, they would build a full and happy life. "I feel the same," Ethan replied, kissing the top of her head. "With you by my side, I know I can overcome anything, and I promise I will do everything to make you happy." Ethan's words were like a sacred vow, a promise of eternal love. "And I promise the same," Emily whispered, holding his hand. "Always." The shine in her eyes reflected the confidence she felt in that moment. They had been through so many trials, but now they were ready to face the future together. And there, under the moonlight and surrounded by the scent of flowers, Ethan and Emily sealed their commitment to a future together, a future that, despite the difficulties, would be built on a solid foundation of love and trust. The path they had walked up to that moment had been full of obstacles, but now, with the promise of a new beginning, they were ready to face whatever came their way, together. Life, which had once seemed uncertain and full of pain, now unfolded before them in vibrant colors and promises of happiness. The months that followed were transformative for Ethan and Emily. Since the emotional reunion with Ethan's father, William Brooks, their lives changed dramatically. Ethan, who was once just a drifter, was now deeply involved in learning the family business, while Emily, his biggest supporter, stayed by his side, helping him every step of the way. With his father's emotional and financial support, Ethan began to recover from years of deprivation. His appearance, once marked by poverty and neglect, now reflected the prosperity he was gradually regaining. He gained weight, his health improved, and he looked younger and revitalized. His transformation was visible not only physically, but also in his attitude and behavior. Each day he became more confident and secure in his place in the world. The broken man who once wandered the streets was now determined to turn his painful past into a promising future, not just for himself but for others in desperate situations. Emily, for her part, also went through an important transition. Seeing Ethan's transformation, she decided it was time to close a chapter in her life. She returned to the restaurant where she worked to say goodbye to her friends and colleagues. With a heart full of gratitude and hope, Emily thanked everyone for their support over the years. Although she felt a pang of sadness about leaving the place that meant so much to her, Emily knew a new chapter awaited her with Ethan. She was ready to move forward, embrace the new, and face future challenges with confidence and optimism. With the restructuring of Brooke Company and William's guidance, Ethan realized he wanted to use his new position and resources to make a difference. Inspired by Emily and their shared journey, Ethan decided it was time to give back to society. He proposed a new project within the company, a charity fund to help the needy, especially the homeless and at-risk youth. William, moved by his son's determination and passion for helping others, immediately supported the idea. For him, seeing Ethan become a compassionate and determined man was the greatest reward after years of pain and regret. The Brooke Foundation was quickly established, with Ethan and Emily leading the initiative. Emily, always practical and with a generous heart, devoted herself to coordinating the foundation's efforts, ensuring that resources reached those in real need. She worked tirelessly to create partnerships with other organizations and volunteers, while also motivating Ethan to continue investing his energy in the cause. The foundation was not just a charity project, but an extension of the love and compassion they felt for each other and the world. Over time, the foundation grew and began to directly impact the lives of hundreds of people. Ethan and Emily actively participated in various initiatives, from distributing food and clothing to building shelters and support centers. Ethan's experience as someone who had lived on the streets gave him a unique perspective, guiding the foundation's decisions and ensuring efforts were directed effectively. He understood the pains and challenges of homelessness, giving him an empathy that many others could not offer. The community quickly recognized Ethan and Emily's work, and they were frequently invited to events and ceremonies in recognition of their positive impact. However, despite all the recognition, they remained humble and focused on their greater goal, transforming lives and offering hope to those in need. For Ethan and Emily, true success was not measured by money or status, but by the smiles on the faces of those they helped and the sense of making a difference in a world that often seemed indifferent to others' suffering. Their relationship also grew stronger during this time. The love they felt for each other deepened each day, and the partnership they had built, both personally and professionally, became a pillar of mutual support. They knew that together they were stronger and able to face any challenge. Their relationship was based not only on affection, but on respect, admiration, and a shared desire to create a better world. Eventually, Ethan and Emily decided it was time to formalize their union. The engagement was announced discreetly, only to close friends and family. They chose a simple, intimate ceremony, reflecting the values of humility and solidarity they had always shared. However, what mattered most to them was their commitment to each other and the life they were building together. The wedding was not just a celebration of their love, but a reaffirmation of their commitment to the values that had united them from the beginning. As the wedding approached, Ethan and Emily began planning their future together. They knew that, in addition to their philanthropic projects, they wanted to start a family and continue living according to the principles that had always guided them. For them, true success was not measured by money or status, but by the impact they could have on others' lives. The foundation was just the beginning. They knew there was much more to be done, and they were determined to do their part. On the wedding day, surrounded by friends, family, and many of the people they had helped over the years, Ethan and Emily promised to love and support each other for the rest of their lives. The event reflected the love and kindness they had spread in the world and was celebrated with joy and gratitude by all present. There was an atmosphere of hope and renewal, as if everyone knew that this was just the beginning of an even greater journey. After the wedding, Ethan and Emily decided to dedicate themselves even more to the work of the Brook Foundation. They set new goals, expanding their efforts to other regions and impacting even more lives. Over time, the foundation became one of the most respected charities in the country, and the Brook's name became synonymous with compassion and generosity. Through their actions, Ethan and Emily not only helped transform lives, but also inspired others to do the same. Now married and with a new life ahead, Ethan and Emily continued to live simply and focused on others. They knew they had overcome enormous challenges to get where they were, and that the journey was far from over. But with love, mutual support, and a deep desire to make a difference, they were ready to face whatever came next. And so, their new chapter began with a legacy of love and kindness that would echo through generations. Ethan and Emily knew that what they were building together was something enduring, something that would impact not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. They were determined to leave the world a little better than they found it, and knew that together they could achieve anything. Each challenge they faced, each obstacle they overcame, prepared them for what was to come. And as they continued their journey, Ethan and Emily knew that no matter how tough the path, they would always have each other and their shared purpose of transforming the world around them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. And don't miss the next incredible stories.